Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Pia. You and I both have a fascination, a curiosity for all things questions, how you frame them, where they come from, what they mean. So today we're going to talk about the philosophy behind questions, and also we're going to touch on the practice. And I sense we're going to have a good old discussion and debate about that. You are, of course, a leading world authority on the topic of questions. I'm a mere practitioner. You've written 5 books, including your latest one, which is fantastic. You have market-leading technology and tools, which we'll touch on. And you and I have both written for Strategy and Business, and you've written in many other places. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. I'm very happy to be here.
Fantastic, fantastic. So let's start a little bit in terms of the thinking, the positioning of questions. And you talk about you're on a mission to democratize the power of questions. So simple question, and I'm feeling very self-conscious as I ask questions throughout this conversation. Simple question, what is the power of questions, and why do you use the word democratize in your framing?
I realized in my philosophical research that questions are probably the most powerful, I would never say tool, because that, then your mind goes around all kinds of stuff. But it's a powerful way of being in the world, asking questions. And it's powerful because when we ask questions, we not only have put ourselves in a position where we actually make up our mind about something. We want to address something and not something else. Asking a question is impossible without taking a lot of stuff out of the equation and focusing on something specifically. And that's very powerful. But it's not only about what we're doing ourselves. The second we ask a question, we have an impact on the person we're asking the question. So
yes.
When you ask me a question, it would be really weird if I started responding to something completely else. I have to stay focused on what you laid out as this is what we're talking about right now, Pia. And that's extremely powerful, that you are not only giving something attention yourself, you're also directing my attention towards something. And that's actually the third element of the power of questions. That's the something that now we're both focusing on the same thing at the same time. The fact that you can do that just by asking a question, directing my attention to the same topic or the same subject matter that you're interested in at the moment is extremely powerful. Because it could be that I was, interested in something else, or I was doing something else at the moment. But the second you ask a question, we're both discussing the same topic at the same time. And that is extremely powerful. The reason I called it why I set out to democratize the power of questions is that I realized in my research that we have been monopolizing this powerful feature throughout millennia, actually. When you go back, my background is in philosophy. If we go all the way back to Plato and Socrates, it was always Socrates asking the questions in Plato's dialogues. And this idea that we have a few people, or the Socrates, or the teachers, the scientists, the leaders, and the HR consultants, for instance, that they know what are the good questions to ask. So they kind of monopolize the power of questions and turn everybody else into respondents. That is someone who's only supposed to respond and come up with answers. And this monopolization of questions, to me, it's kind of obvious that if we've been doing that for thousands of years, then it's a really strong structural dimension of the way we are, connecting and relating in our companies and in society at large. And by democratizing this power, we will get access to a lot of interesting perspectives that are otherwise being left out of the discussion.
It really is powerful, both what you said and the role of questions is that connection. As you say, I'd like to think that when I ask a question of somebody, we then connect on it. I'm not always sure, but there's always distractions or other things going on. But if you are an individual, you're in an organization, and you and I both work in the business world, it's just dying to ask more questions, have the opportunity, but the questions are monopolized by their boss. What does it take to break down the barriers for somebody to ask, maybe for the first time, a question of their boss or somebody else?
You're up against some strong structures, as I mentioned. And if you're in a culture where people are not aware of the power of questions, and they are not aware of how they monopolize the power of questions, then it can be difficult to even become aware and even realize that this is what's going on. Because we have to remember that this is built into the methodologies, to the tools, to the way we do things. If you take interviews, coaching, surveys, it's the same basic structure where you have a few people asking questions and a lot of people being respondents. Even when leaders are being extremely willing to involve, maybe they have Ask Me Anything sessions, or they have, these kind of, they are really trying to make room for other people. We kind of keep on having this ask me this one-to-many logic or many-to-one logic. It's extremely difficult for us to break this idea that questions are kind of some people have it as their job to ask questions and everybody else doesn't.
I see. There's like an exception. You sort of, this is the norm.
Yes.
But on a Friday or on a summer away day, we'll give you the opportunity to ask questions. So how do you, forgive me for interrupting, but how do you flip it then? So imagine you were creating your own startup, a new one, or you were advising an organization. It's on a greenfield site and you read your research, you believe in it, you want to practice it. How would you create that connectivity and that democracy around questions? Where would you start?
I think there are some basic rules, so to speak, and to follow when you want to break or flip. I actually use the term a flip survey. I developed some, as you mentioned, some technologies that's trying to flip these basic structures and logic. Now, there are some basic rules, I think, that you should pay attention to. One is that this idea that some questions are better than others, that you have to be good at asking questions and you need to practice asking better questions, that this idea is probably something you need to let go of. You probably have to be willing to say, I don't want to put that much pressure on my questions or anybody else's questions. The important thing is that we actually do ask questions and that everybody does. Because this idea that they have to be good or we have to be better at asking questions is actually preventing a lot of people from asking questions because they're afraid of looking stupid, of asking a stupid question or a question that everybody else knows the answer. So I'm not going to be the one who asks this question. So we're doing it with good intention. We want to pay attention to the power of questions and we say, we should all be better at this. But it sometimes has negative impact and making people feel too self-conscious and too afraid of asking questions. And that's the exact opposite of what we want. So I think that would be the first rule, to kind of create a room, make room for people to ask whatever questions are on their mind.
Yes, love that.
And all the questions are welcome. Another rule I think it's a good idea to have in the back of your mind is, in the back of your head, is that it's not necessarily you have to have these one-on-one dynamics built into your culture. So instead of focusing too much on the relationship between the leader and the employees, that's a relationship that almost per default is one-to-many or many-to-one. You have one leader and then you have a team of employees. Instead, the leader should maybe focus on how do we cultivate an environment where people feel comfortable asking each other questions and looking to each other for answers. Because that is what most people do most of the time. We don't spend most of our time talking to our leaders in one-on-ones. We do it talking to our colleagues or talking to clients or talking to other kinds of stakeholders. So the questions we are asking or not asking in those kind of conversations actually have a bigger impact on how the work is being done during the day, and during the week, and during the month and years. So if we really want to figure out, how should I understand the culture and the way we're working in our organization, we should shift the focus from our own questions and our own conversations to the conversations people are having with each other and the questions they are asking and not asking in those settings.
It's interesting. Some of the cultures I'll put this diplomatically, observed or perhaps even experienced, where it's more mercenary, peers, people at the same grade, I found often don't ask each other questions apart from the very functional, where's the vending machine or where's this?
Yeah.
Because they fear that they're going to give something away or look stupid
exactly.
because they're effectively competing with each other. But let me build on that theme. There's a lot of what you just said, so I want to try and unpack it a little bit more. If you're in a more competitive or elitist type of culture, some people think, well, if I ask questions, I might show that I don't have enough knowledge, or flip it the other way. I actually need to show that I'm an expert, and I'll only ask questions around the edges. And that might be a know-it-all culture, it might be complacency, might be fear. How do you get the balance right in whatever the interaction is between asking good questions, of course, and whatever questions are on your mind, as you just said, versus imparting your knowledge? And the reason I ask that is I find a lot of people, some coaches, they ask question after question after question, and they don't share enough about what they think, which I think, something I've written about extensively, they're missing something. They're not giving enough. So how do you get the balance right between questioning and sharing your own knowledge?
Yeah, I actually like to think about it as a dance. That questioning and answering should be like a dance. If there's not a balance, if you find yourself in a relationship, whether it be, in a coaching relationship or leadership relationship, where it becomes too, everybody knows who plays what roles. So now we're in a situation where you're supposed to ask all the questions. I'm supposed to come up with all the answers. That's kind of the contract for a podcast like this. But we have lots of situations where there shouldn't be such a contract, where it should be more like a dance, where we engage in a conversation, where if the leader or the coach has asked, a lot of questions, and there is a need for the conversation to move forward, we need a new kind of, insight or a new kind of observation. At least that's my experience with coaches and therapists, that sometimes it's extremely valuable if the person coaching you is making an observation. I noticed that you were just saying this and this and that. I would love to hear more about that. So combining an observation with an invitation to elaborate, because sometimes we don't need a new question. We need a chance to unfold or unpack some of the experiences that we just shared. And
I love that invitation, giving people space. And I love the concept of a dance, as opposed to some formulaic theatrical performance where actually everyone knows their role, and you ask a question just to be polite, and then you get back in your box.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that goes for professional relationships, but it also goes for, personal relationships. And especially I've been very, intrigued by seeing, my relationship with my own children, but also relationship with younger people in the work, at the workplace and also in the public space, seeing how we're not necessarily, and by we, I mean as adults, people with experience, we're not necessarily very good at making that room for other people to explore their own curiosity, to actually become curious about what it is that they know and don't know. And it becomes so much more interesting to be around other people if we don't already know what they're about to say. Or it's just, if we make room for them to surprise themselves as well.
And be comfortable with that space and a bit of silence.
Yeah.
Not prejudging or loading up our comments, invitations, questions with what we want them to say. I mean, in your work, which I read, I think most, if not all of, and I've greatly admired, I mean, you talk about trying to get to the questions that people really care about, the questions that matter to people, whether it's colleagues, as we've been talking about, citizens in countries and societies, customers. Tell me a little bit more about that. You've talked about giving people the opportunity, giving them the space. What else can you do to really find out what people care about and which questions they really care about?
So I actually work very systematically on that, because I think if the monopolization of questions has been built into the structures, societal structures and the corporate structures and methods that we use for thousands of years, then we need some new structures and new kinds of technologies and methods to unleash the power of questions. It's not enough for individuals. It's needed for individuals to try and flip their mindset and flip their way of doing things. But we also need structural tools and techniques to help us, because otherwise it's simply too difficult. So I work very systematically on, it started out by simply taking notes in meetings, in conversations, always, running being on the bus or in the supermarket. I always have a notebook with me and noting the questions other people are asking. So I kind of made it part of my work to find out what happens when I'm not the one asking all the questions, because I have a tendency to do that. I think a lot of thought-driven people do, and a lot of leaders, we tend to, because we are curious and we want to have an impact and we want to see the world change, into a better place. So we tend to ask a lot of questions. So by studying what happens when I don't ask all the questions, but I pay a lot of attention to the questions other people are asking, and then actually working systematically on sometimes sorting them into themes to see, okay, can I see some patterns here? Do people ask a lot of why questions or how questions or what questions? And what are the blind spots in the questions they are asking? And I work also, that's what I built 2 different digital platforms to help leaders do that on large scale, but also in meetings. How can we fairly easily map the questions people are asking each other? And at the same time, start looking for what I call shadow questions. What are the questions that no one is asking out loud, but between the lines of all the other questions, these are the questions that we actually need to discuss in order to find common ground, in order to move forward together. So practicing listening, not only to the questions people are asking, but also the questions they are not asking, but maybe they have different reasons for not asking them, but there are. It's my experience that there is a lot of gold in there in these shadow questions.
I just have a picture of you now walking on the street on a bus with your notebook, just sort of scribbling away, perhaps in your own family conversations. And that's a very good question.
Yeah, exactly.
And the shadow questions as well. Absolutely. The sort of not just the unsaid questions, and people focus on that, but sort of if you really dig deep, what are they really trying to ask? But let's just call out. I mean, let's have some plugs, because I'm a big fan of tools where they can really, break down ways of thinking and also illuminate new thinking and questions. Just tell us a little bit. Give us the names and how people could use them.
Yes. So there are 2 platforms. One is called Quest. QVEST.io. That's a digital platform designed for leaders and transformation consultants in a typically large organization with hundreds of employees, inviting people to ask each other questions about a specific topic. So it's like a flip survey. So you set a topic. It could be our digital transformation in the future or something like that, or digital transformation something. It can be about all kinds of different topics within the organization, but typically it should be a strategic topic, something that requires sometimes hundreds of people, thousands of people, but require everyone to join a conversation about the same topic at the same time. We talked a little bit about that earlier as well. So actually tapping into this power of questions. And so you have a topic, you're motivated as a senior leader, typically would be an executive vice president or someone from the C-suite, motivating in a short video saying, this is a topic that everyone should have a conversation about right now, because we cannot succeed unless everyone is on board. So I invite you to join this conversation, 1-minute video. And then that goes out an invitation to, it can be hundreds of people receiving an email with a link to the Quest platform where they can see the invitation and see the video. And then they are invited to ask a question of one of the other participants. So I say, I want to ask David this question about our digital transformation because he's working in IT and I think he has some brilliant insight and I'm really curious about this. So I ask my question and I pick you from the participant list and you receive an email saying one of your colleagues asked you a question. You get to respond.
And you do that in live sessions, or you do that over a period of time?
Typically over a work week. And that's because we work with global organizations, people working in different time zones, different locations.
Yes.
And we want this to be something that's easy for people to do between meetings or whenever it fits their schedule. So it's typically within a work week. You respond to the question. And then you get to ask a new question. So it's kind of like a relay where you have all these one-on-one interactions going on, and where people, of course, if you receive a question, you think it's interesting, you respond, and then you come up with a new question. Maybe it's inspired by the one you received. Maybe you have come up with something else. But it's a way of creating these spaces where people connect one-on-one, and at the same time make room for them to ask questions anonymously. So it's not like I have to say, best regards, Pia. I can, but if I don't, you don't know where the question came from. So you actually, at least that's what we can see in the data, you would typically make an effort in describing why you're answering the way you are. So we get really thick data because we get, people's own words about what's going on. After the quest, it closes and everybody immediately gets access to an output page showing a network visualization. How did we distribute the questions between the teams? Do we see some teams being very strongly connected and other teams being, not as connected? There's a word cloud showing the words we used when talking about this digital transformation. People as a big word or teams is a big word. And then as a participant, you can click the words and then you will see all the questions and answers your colleagues were asking.
Great.
So it's a way of tapping into this collective curiosity. And then, of course, there are all kinds of analytics features that can help you as the leader to explore the different kinds of patterns and the question profile showing, it looks like we ask a lot of how questions, but we never ask why. That's probably a blind spot in the culture.
I'm already thinking of clients I'm working with where I could think of applications. I mean, I've used various crowdsourcing platforms for many, many years, but they haven't focused on questions, and often they've been very staged.
Yes.
It's been open.
Yeah.
But actually, this is the way we're working through a particular problem, which has a benefit. But what about Question Jam then?
Yeah, Question Jam is the light version. It's a free tool. It's mostly used by educators across the globe. So it's a 7-minute game where it's the same logic. Everyone gets to ask their own questions and pick a recipient between the participants, and then the word cloud is displayed. So it's not a lot of analytics. It's not strategic. It's not about alignment in the same way, strategic alignment.
It's a sense,
but it's a 7-minute game. You can use it in meetings to make sure that the questions in the room are actually being unearthed. So we are not, before the group thinking sets in, because that happens very quickly. then suddenly everybody asks the same kind of questions. I wonder why. So this is a way to really make sure that all the questions, all the curiosity, but also the doubt and the skepticism is being, something we can talk about in this meeting instead of something people keep to themselves.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Let's keep on this. So I'll share the links with listeners in obviously the show notes for this episode. Let's keep on the theme of sort of tools and tech. Artificial intelligence, in terms of the questioning, the power of questioning and the practice of it, Is it a complement? Is it a substitute? Is it an irritant? A catalyst? How would you describe it?
I wish I could put one word on it, but I think it should be something that helps us pay attention to the importance of being curious, but also having a lot of doubt and skepticism. It's something that if we are not, when ChatGPT hit the world a little over a year ago, I sat down and read Alan Turing's article where he first introduced the idea of artificial intelligence. And it was extremely inspiring to figure out what were the assumptions built into AI from the very beginning.
Yes.
The assumptions about digital computers, of course, but more importantly, the assumptions about human beings. What did when he set out to imitate the human brain or the human way of thinking, what did he assume? And there were, of course, a lot of really interesting stuff in that article, but there were also a lot of interesting things seen from a philosophical perspective missing. Questions such as, why do people even think? Why do they even bother thinking? What is the problem we're trying to solve when we think? And do computers have the same problem? And do we even want them to have the same kind of problems? Because the whole idea is that they should solve our problems. They should not have problems on their own. So that there's so many questions being raised with AI. Not only the questions we ask of AI, but also about AI and how we should understand ourselves in light of AI. And I think if AI has done anything, it is to spark that curiosity about that. We have had the past years, and when I say we, I mean, the whole world, the human race.
Yes.
We have asked questions that I, as a philosopher, have been wondering why we haven't asked, for decades, for hundreds of years. And now AI is here, and now we're asking all these questions. We are actually engaging in conversations about what does it mean to be human? Why do we do the things the way we do? What happens if we don't? Yes. What does it mean to be ethical? What does it mean to have an existential crisis and being threatened, feeling threatened by your whole entire existence? These questions, I am forever grateful for AI for, reminding us that it's our job to ask these questions. So in that sense, it's not directly to say it's a coach or it's a supplement or it's more to say to me, it's a reminder. And it works perfectly because we have, as the human race, we've been reminded that we need to ask a lot of questions about what it means to be human now in a, AI obsessed world.
And a deeper level than just, you have to be, let's focus on the human aspects of creativity or judgment or intuition. Great. I mean, let's go down a bit deeper than that.
Yeah, exactly.
We read those articles about 2 years ago. It's like, let's move on. I want to come back to a topic that you've mentioned a few times today, and indeed our pre-work for this podcast, around the role people can or should not play in improving how people ask questions. And hear me out just for a moment before you correct me or challenge me, and by all means do. I've been in situations over the last 25 years where people have invited questions, but the way they've asked a question of me has led me to not want to ask. And they haven't role modeled good questioning to the point where I've thought, is it worth it, frankly? So they've asked closed questions. They've used why all the time. And if you're an advisor, spend all my time as an advisor and with infusions of coaching, you have to be selective in using closed questions and why questions because they are loaded with bias and loaded with things. So I'm not suggesting there's a toolbox that you should say, there's one way of asking questions. But I think there are some principles you should be aware of if you want to be a good questioner. And some of my work with literally CEOs and others is not only trying to open them up in ways that you've described, but also improving the quality and the clarity of their questioning in their own way, whilst, of course, then inviting people to ask their questions. So that's my intro. That's my pitch, I guess. That's the opening remarks in a debate. I guess the question for you is, how much can and should we coach people to ask better questions?
That's a nice one. I think it's part of the, if we go back to the dance image, then it's, to be able to at least be a dance partner that people enjoy dancing with. Then sometimes you have to move forward. Sometimes you need to move, backwards. You have to move in a way that so the other person doesn't feel alone. And doesn't feel like, okay, I'm just standing here, or feel, okay, you are making all the decisions and there's no space for me to move. That means that we need to have pay some attention to the impact of the questions we're asking. So for me, it's not that I should come into a conversation having a fixed idea of, I want to ask these questions in this way, in this order, because then I know I'm asking good questions or asking better questions. It's more like, how do I put myself in a mental, what's it called?
Mindset.
Yeah. How do I make sure that I have the mindset where I can not only ask questions that I'm, sincerely curious about, finding out where is the other person when it comes to this topic, but also giving myself enough room to pick up on the little signals and the little responses that are coming. Not only did they say yes or no, but also, did they stop for a moment? Did they hesitate before answering? The thing you just did when you asked me a question, the reason, I think that was a nice question is that it had me thinking. I had to, explore my own experience before trying to come up with an answer. I'm not even sure that this is a good answer or that this is the right answer, but this is the answer I'm capable of giving right now. And for you to be good at asking questions, you need to make that room, you need to listen. And I know that the next question you're going to ask me will take this answer into account. And that's way more important than whether, how many articles you've read about asking good questions or whether they're open or closed, because you can ask a closed question.
What exactly the first word is or how long the sentence is.
Yeah, exactly.
And just building on what you're saying, it's interesting, in a conversation I had with a client recently where they're having some pretty important discussions amongst a senior group. Actually, thinking back to our prep for those conversations, it was as much on mindset as how to do it. There were some practical things, which is short, sharp, open question. That was frankly the easy stuff, because they have a tendency to be long-winded. But the other part was actually a belief in actually, if I'm in the right space, if I create the right conditions, people around me have some amazing ideas that I haven't even heard about before, but they've probably never been asked and nobody's ever listened. So there's actually getting themselves in the mental space and some physical stuff as well, smiling for once, as opposed to looking very serious and stressed. So actually, it's all of those combinations. You need to do, if you like, create all of those ingredients and mix them together so you're in a great position to give, receive, dance, move to the left, right, twist, twirl, whatever you do in that dance.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about you, apart from dancing and writing in your notebook. Can't get that image out of my head. Given all the brilliant work that you're doing in this space and research especially, how have you improved your own, I'm going to say questioning, but that's too narrow, but you know what I mean? How have you improved your own use of questions in your life in the last few years?
I think I have been, I'm not sure whether I improved, according to my my almost grown-up children. They still have to tell me, now you're doing it again, Pia. Mom, please stop asking all these questions. So I'm not sure whether I improved. But I am trying, and I am, again, when you just talked, I was thinking about it again, this paying attention to all these shadow questions and paying attention to I received a message from someone, I don't know her, who just read my book, and she wanted to share a question that someone asked her recently that she thought was the best question she was ever asked. So she was like, I just want to know more about questions. And I said, could you please share the question? And then she wrote it. And then immediately after, she sent me a message saying, now that I had to write it down, it's only now I realized that it's not a question. So I think it was something, tell me about your day from where it looks right now, or something like that. And that's not a question. And I think that is part of, how I'm trying to improve, is to get a better grasp of all the questions we're asking when we're not asking questions. But other people are connecting with us in a way as if we asked a brilliant question. David, I really love talking to him because he asked so many brilliant questions. And then it turns out that what I really loved about talking to you is something you said way before you phrased it as a question, but a comment or an observation, or, sharing something that made me feel, oh, that's what I want to talk about. So I really think that the best way to improve as a questioner or as a, I don't know, questor, someone who's on a quest in life, is to pay attention both to the questions we are not asking and also the questions we are asking without framing them as questions, because that's where we have a chance to connect on a deeper level than just what we're actually saying. And yeah,
I think that's brilliant. I mean, if you're leading an organization and you're looking to inspire exceptional performance on any level and however you measure it, what you're describing here is absolutely fundamental. And I think many people are scratching the surface, or they're just doing it badly, or they don't care, or they haven't done it for a long time. Whereas I think some people might think, oh, this is around the edges of doing real business. That's a macho perspective, or it's something we do when we're having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Actually, what you're talking about is real connections, surfacing the best thinking, expressing yourself in new different ways, enabling everyone to give the best of themselves. I mean, if that's not some of the ingredients for a great performance, I don't know what is. But let me continue on the philosophical and the practical and ask two final questions, as I do to all of my guests. The philosophical one is, what impact are you looking to have on the world around you?
I really would be very happy if people feel more, after talking to me or listening to me or reading some of the things that I wrote, if they feel more comfortable with being human in this world. And that comes with, it's okay that I have all these doubts. It's okay that I'm not always sure how to phrase the way I see the world. It's okay if I feel a little bit uncomfortable before entering a room with other people. It's not only okay, but a very strong sign that I am being human, that I have more questions than answers. This is how I learn. This is how I grow. If I had all the answers, there would be no need for me to continue. It would be kind of like, well, that's it. Thank you very much. I can leave now.
Well,
but the fact that you have more questions is really what keeps you going, what keeps you learning and growing, and especially young people, when they're just on the verge of someone convincing them that they should have answers because now you should perform, now you're responsible, now you should do all these things. I would like to be the voice saying, well, don't forget that, what you really have some very, very strong human features. And that's the ones that that will help you help everybody else in making this world a better place. So I would like to be that voice, one of those voices.
Well, I think you are already, and I'm sure there's a lot more to come. And the practical then, when you're having your absolutely best, most brilliant day, you're smashing it out of the park, whatever it is, what helps you do that the most?
that is conversations like this one. Connecting with another human being. Sometimes it's someone close to me. Sometimes it's not. It's someone I've met a few times, but whose work I admire or way of being in the world that I know I can learn from. But having these conversations, I can only have one or two a day, because it's kind of like to actually have that mindset we talked about before. It takes it takes warming up and it takes calming down afterwards. And it can be, it can also be on a keynote or something like that, being on stage and getting just, this sense from the room that people are thinking together now. It's not like the most important thing is not what I'm saying at the stage. It's what's going on in the head of all these people right now and connecting with each other.
Yes.
That just gives me so much. I really love this feeling of we are being human, and we are doing what we're supposed to do. Staying right there where we don't quite know yet, but we are trying.
Don't quite know. Yes. Gosh, what a conversation. Enriching. Yeah, I mean, meaningful. You're doing properly distinctive work here that I think touches lots of people in all walks of life, in business, outside of business, at all levels. So I take my hat off to you.
Thank you, David.
I'm thinking about dancing, metaphorically and physically. Where can people find out more about your work, your books, services, keynotes? Where should they go online?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's actually the only social media platform where I am. I have a website called pialauritzen.dk, and then I just as you know published this brief book about questions.
Yes.
And I really love hearing from people when they have because it was an experiment trying to say, how briefly can I get, all kinds of perspectives on questions, from the philosophical to the historical to the psychological, and comparing human beings with animals and what's going on,
It's riveting.
But I really like to connect with people on LinkedIn, and also the Question Jam and Quest.io platforms, if people are curious and unleashing the power of questions in their organizations.
Wonderful. Well, take a deep breath. I'm going to have to, as you say, sort of decompress and use all of this newfound insight in my work and maybe my wider aspects of my life too. The notepad on the bus. And I'm sure listeners will have got a lot from this conversation. So thank you, Pia, for the conversation.
Thank you so much, David. It was a pleasure.
That was another edition of Lansfield on the Line. I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please do check out the other episodes in this series. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and to the podcast. And if you're feeling especially generous, give us a nice rating. And Pia, thank you ever so much again.
Thank you.